Discover how you can green your life by building a knowledge base of current sustainable and eco-savvy trends. This series will delve into hot topics, current standards and practices, ways to design better spaces, and specify materials that benefit not only us as consumers, but the world as a whole. Members of Green, as sustainable materials distributors, and other industry leaders weigh in throughout the series. This is Build Green, Live Green.
Hi, this is Jessica with Build Green, Live Green, Green's podcast on sustainable trends in the building industry. And today we are here with Juan Morillas, who is the founder of Share Your Green Design. Hi, Juan.
Hi, how are you? Good to be here with you.
Very good. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited about, I came across Share Your Green Design and I started looking at what you guys were doing. And I really think you've taken a unique position of looking at the green building environment, the whole ecosystem holistically, and kind of holding designers and architects responsible for their role in green design. So that's really appealing to me because, we have a lot of, sustainable products at Green, and, trying to make the connection between those products and, this kind of the whole built ecosystem can be very difficult. And you kind of created Share Your Green Design to, really hold people accountable and to attach some of these metrics that are really important for basically saving the planet.
Yeah, thank you. That's why we started with this initiative of Share Green Design, and it started actually. I'm an architect. I'm an associate architect at BDP in the Dublin studio, and I was working on projects, and I was thinking myself and always asking questions: how can we make our designs more sustainable? And I was doing a lot of research, since I was studying architecture at the uni, and there isn't much information available. There isn't many case studies. So then I thought, why don't we just? So I know a little bit about this topic. So why don't I share what I know, and I ask other people also to share what they know, and hopefully, if we are all together on this, as many people as possible, then we can all get something clear. Because even if you go to I've attended a lot of webinars, and during the COVID period was good because there was a lot of platforms and events, and you could hear completely opposite approaches and ideas, and then it was who is right, who is wrong. So that's why we set up Share Green Design, and from the beginning has been a team work, and it's trying to get people together that are aligned in the ethos to be transparent, and to our approach is we publish the case studies or research or news. We obviously curate it as well, but we don't judge because there are so many different approaches that I have my own view, but that view also shifts. So when we started, I have a view. Now I think I broadened my mind as well. And because when we started, for example, something that you pointed out about designers, we had a focus on data, and there is still many people that just want to focus on data and embodied carbon, operational carbon, just the numbers than the figures. But it's much more than that, because it's like the carbon tunnel. And talking to people that in other countries, like because it's, if you are talking for example, in the US or in Europe, it's easier and there are more people doing that. But outside of that, there are so many countries that don't have the tools, they don't have the time, and just they don't know how to do it, but they are doing really good sustainable design or green design, or we can call it whatever we want. So we had to capture those, even though we didn't have any data about it. But it's obvious that they are sustainable because most of them, they are just done with natural materials and local materials. So how can that not be sustainable or green? It has to be. So we that's change, and there is a lot of research about it, and we publish it. And so.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think I've traveled a lot, having lived in Asia for a while, and to a lot of countries over there where landscaping is native, and all they're not importing containers of drywall and things like that. They're using their own resources to build structures, and it's the most fundamental way of building, and it's how we started, and we've gotten so far away from it. We're trying to kind of almost close that loop.
Indeed.
In construction. So one of the things that I'd like to ask you is, there are so many platforms and groups, and as you mentioned, data sets. It can be very confusing as to, should I be building to a LEED standard? Should I be building to a WELL standard? Do I source my products from mindful materials? Where, kind of how do you help kind of decipher that whole glut of platforms and services out there to help an owner or an architect or designer know where to start?
I'm going to say two words that I use at a presentation at the Technical University of Dublin. And so after I presented Shared Green Design and a few case studies, I said, well, actually, there were three words. One was, I think, we need more education, we need more data, and plenty of common sense. So I think common sense.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to tell someone that's starting on this, what would be that? So, for example, you mentioned LEED, or in the UK they use a lot BREEAM or WELL. So
Yeah.
I've seen so many buildings, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, with all the, I don't want to give, I don't want to refer to any, but many badges and claiming they are the most sustainable buildings. And when you look at them, you don't need to look in too much detail. They are obviously not sustainable, because the approach, even though I'm not saying it wasn't done correctly, it's just maybe the focus wasn't the right one.
Right.
So one example I use a lot, and because I think it's very clear, is when you see a fully glazed building in a hot climate country, and it has all the
Yep.
badges and it's gold, platinum, so on and so forth.
Yep.
That can't be sustainable, even
Right.
though there might be that all the systems and everything that's put in place makes that the energy consumption is low. But if you look at the embodied carbon to achieve that, the whole life carbon approach is not sustainable, in my view, in my approach.
And you said a fully glazed building. So because it's all glass, what is is it the embodied
Yeah,
carbon of the glass? Is it the reflective
yeah, it's
heat
all
or?
together. It's because if you have, for example, if it's glass, then the M&E equipment you need to compensate for that solar gain and heat gain, that adds a lot
Yes.
cost, sorry, and more M&E
Right.
equipment. But also then you need all
Right.
the films and layers and forgot the name now, but all the different layers. So you need double glazing or triple glazing, or you
Yep.
need a double facade with a something in between to provide the shading, and all that helps to
Yep.
get the heat gain out. But at what cost? Is so doesn't it make more sense that if you are in a hot climate country, you build more solid walls and hopefully
Yeah.
ideally thick, and then you help with that. And it's something that also has been, and I've been arguing a lot in the last few years. It's people have, or not people, but the industry, let's say, have the concept that sustainable design is expensive. And I
Hmm.
think that's because all these super high spec and high efficiency, or whatever we want to call it,
Yes.
that they are expensive, but it's because the early approach or the early decisions were not the right one. Therefore, you need to spend a lot of money to make them work afterwards. But if you make them work from the beginning and they are designed correctly and they consider where they are located, you don't have to spend more money afterwards. And therefore, it's more economic to build. So it's that shift. And I think all that is because, again, going back to the budgets we were talking about earlier, if you've done your design and then someone says, by the way, we want to achieve that, whatever, I don't want to say anyone. Someone says, well, now we need to add this and we need to add that and we need to add that. And it's adding cost because it's not, going
Hmm.
back to what you said at the beginning, the design about the responsibility that the designers have. I think it's, I don't know what percentage, but a huge responsibility is on the designers. Because if we get it right at the beginning, then everything is much easier after. And that means we have to work together, and collaboration is key. So it's not about the architect doing the design and then there is a structure engineer that comes after and the other structure. And then the M&E, they add the M&E. So it has to be all assessed and discussed at early stage.
So let me ask you this, because what you're describing to me sounds like it might fit nicely with the evolution towards BIM, information modeling, right? Because it seems like kind of rendering it in an environment, might allow you to do a lot of those things easier. Do you see, is BIM part of kind of the ethos that you're looking at? And do you see the industry, I mean, it's been around for a while, but do you see kind of the sustainability and BIM kind of advancing forward together?
Yeah, I think BIM is very important as well. So we've been working for the last, I've been personally working in BIM for the last 7 years or 8. And it helps a lot because you're able to see, so you're modeling, you are adding components from the beginning. And the other thing we do as well is that, doing life cycle assessments from the early stages as well. So it's not about doing the design, everything in BIM. Then when you finish, you do a life cycle assessment with whatever tool you use, because then at the end it's all done. It's important to start doing it early so you can do the corrections that you need. And it's very easy, or relatively easy, to do those tweaks when you are early. So there is a few graphs. There is one interesting, and it's the same from a QS point of view. So if you do changes at the beginning, it's easy to incorporate. As you make the changes further down the line, the cost is much higher. And it's the same with sustainability or embodied carbon or operational carbon.
So let me ask you, so I understand what you're saying from the system standpoint is you can walk into a building in downtown Washington, D.C. that has a Fitwel banner, that has a LEED plaque, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, it may have checked all the boxes and got all the credits, but it may not be the most sustainable version of that building that could be built. And what you guys are doing is really trying to kind of help people holistically think about the process from the beginning by having all the relevant parties part of the conversation. And I think you almost have to sometimes abandon traditional thinking. So what I've seen with some of these LEED projects is people kind of have that baseline building in mind and they try to add on to it to get those credits, rather than kind of less material is one of the most basic things you can do to be sustainable from the outset.
That's absolutely right. And it's a really good point because, again, when you talk about cost, and cost is another key driver here, because if it's expensive, it's not going to happen. So we need to find a way so we have to make it sustainable at the same cost or lower. Otherwise, it gets more difficult. Something that, another good example, if we work with the structure, because around, it depends on the study, but between 70, 75, 80% of the embodied carbon of a building is in the structure. And if you build basements, then a really huge percentage is on the basement. So let's say there is no basement. So you take 4 or 5 story buildings, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then you look at the span between columns. So just by putting the columns together, you are reducing the span. Therefore, the slabs can be thinner. And if the slab is thinner, that means less concrete, therefore less embodied carbon, and it's cheaper. Therefore, sustainability is cheaper. But you have to do that when you are doing the initial design, because if you design your structure or you don't even design it, and then someone comes after and try to set up the beams and the columns, and there are plenty of transfer beams, and it gets complicated, then that's it. So that's why it has to be reviewed holistically.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example, because you're thinking, well, I'm putting more beams in there, that's more. But when you offset it with what you're able to do on the slab side, with the thickness, it makes more sense. And you bring up something important that I want to ask you about, because, we're talking about some of these building certifications and stuff not being, as sustainable as they strive to be by how they're implemented. One of the things that really caught on 10, 12 years ago and has since changed, the perception has changed, but was this idea of FSC. So FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, is a certification for wood that it required the entire supply chain for wood suppliers, all the way down to pulp or anything like that, to maintain chain of custody and prove that you used FSC sources. So even if you go to the store, you get some paper towels, they might be FSC or have the FSC logo on them. It became very burdensome for the supply chain. And, a lot of people didn't think it was necessarily, as valuable as it was being passed off. And we use suppliers for wood in Finland, and they kind of scoff at the idea of FSC because they are already better than FSC, the way that they manage their forests and things like that. So I think it almost gave wood a bad name, in my opinion, for a little while, especially architecturally. And I'm starting to see that come back. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that, because wood is a carbon sink. It should be responsibly harvested. But in your mind, is wood a good construction material when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And just let me say one before that one. So when I said before about lead or audit badges, I'm not saying they are bad. I think it's good because it captures the operational energy, which is good, but it's not the full picture. So we have to pay attention to many other things, just in case someone is listening.
It's a good framework.
We need to do much more than that. And then in wood, that's I will summarize it with a conversation we had with one member of our team who is a researcher at a university here, and he did a study on timber. So we've been publishing a lot of projects with timber, and in my mind, as an architect and with everything I've read, and it's more or less, timber was like it's a great material, so we should use more timber. Even though I've attended a few presentations with suppliers, manufacturers, and I always ask the question: so, do we have enough forests? So if we change from concrete steel to timber, and it keeps growing and growing and growing, and the demand it's growing faster than the forest, at what point, can the industry, the wood industry, cope with that? So anyway, and it's a difficult question to answer because I don't think it can cope with the whole. If you think on countries like China or India, where there is over 1 billion population, I don't think then timber would be enough. But anyway, going back to your question, timber looked like that silver bullet we can use. Then this researcher, he sent me a message one morning and said, Juan, look, this research. And it was about what happened with timber at the end of life, that all that carbon that is sunk, at the end of life, it goes back to the atmosphere. Because when the timber rots and everything, all the carbon that was there locked, then it's not locked anymore. So unless we keep the timber in the circular economy forever, at some point that CO2 will go back to the atmosphere. So I'm not saying timber is bad. I love it, and I think it's a really good material. It's just that, again, it's having that open mind and don't think that it's a silver bullet and I just add timber and my building is green.
Right. I agree with that. I think that I am starting to see it come back. I think a lot of it is the aesthetic of it, but we're starting to see what I see happening in the wood space is there's new ways of treating the wood to give it more longevity. So we're not turning it over so much. So we work with a company called Arbor Wood that uses thermally modified wood. And now you took something that would have lasted, maybe 5 to 7 years, and it's going to last you 25 years outside. So, these new treatment and they can treat up to 15 different species of wood. So something like pine that's typically, used for, dimensional lumber or framing timber, kind of it's soft. So, you don't see a lot of it used architecturally, but now with these new treatments, they can use it in better ways. So there's things that are happening to wood that are giving it more longevity, which I think is also a good thing.
I think you made a good point there as well about timber or wood that wasn't used in construction much before, and now with the new processes they can be used. Also when you cross laminate it, I've seen some researches even with, I think it's birch, that you can cross laminate. And it grows very quickly. So if we can going back to the management of the forest, so if those forests can grow faster and we can use it, that means the cycle it's quicker and it can be used for construction because it's not, you need certain strength for the timber as well. And there is also some good research going on with bamboo, also laminated. But I want to add just one thing. When you start looking at cross laminated timbers, they use glue. Now those glues, there is research that say those glues are bad even for your health. So if you build your house or made of CLT, you need to be careful with the kind of glues that can be used. Then they could have, nasty chemical products, and I don't want to say any name now, but we have to be mindful of that. It's not, again, it's not I just build it with timber and that's it. It's all super sustainable. No, there is
Right.
still a downside to it, because also to make it, if it's solid timber, obviously it's better because then you can recycle it. It's easier to recycle. If you have all the glues, then it makes a bit more difficult. So it's just keeping everything into, it's very difficult actually, because there are so many things you have to take into account that you might miss something, and people believe, and designers believe they are doing the right thing, or we believe we are doing the right thing, and then you figure out that actually it's not because of these things.
Yeah. So I've spoken at a couple universities, like a class or something like that, and I think it was like 2 times in a row I got asked the same question: what's the perfect building material? And we carry all these different building materials, and this one might have recycled content. This one might be made locally, but there's always these trade-offs, and you just have to choose the one that aligns best with your goals, whether they're personal goals or whether they're operational goals. But you have to make trade-offs right now. We haven't mastered this. This is not
I agree.
we don't have a master class in sustainable design right now.
And I think that's where common sense come in place, because you have all the options, and then which one? You have to think about it, and just be sensible about it.
But you got to be willing to accept the trade-offs, right? You can't, or you're just going to spin your wheels, because we're just not there yet where you don't have to make any sort of trade-off. Yeah. That leads me to kind of sort of a question as we wind down here. But when I think about buildings, the big ticket items are the concrete and the drywall, the framing timber. What is being done in those big items? I mean, I've seen companies trying to make, kind of like carbon neutral concrete, but these are functional, huge structural items that you don't want to mess with in a 20-story tower in downtown Chicago. You don't want it to be made with eco concrete that's never been tested, or how far are we away from taking those big carbon products, those foundational building materials, and finding better alternatives?
Yeah, I think concrete definitely, and steel. So there is a reason why concrete is the most widely used material in the world, and it's because it's a really good material. Now, it has the main issue is the cement. That's where the main problem is. So I'm following a few companies that are doing a lot of work and research on that, trying to, especially working with replacements, cement replacements, because as you said earlier, the concrete has been used since the Romans or before, using different additives or different components. But because you have a few things that can be found anywhere, you mix them together and it's a super strong material. So if we can use less of it, because concrete, I think it's trying to negate reality is not helpful either. So we are going to, my view is, we are going to continue using concrete. And I said earlier, there are many countries. So if you think about it, just it's a reflection that I would like to make as well. If you look at let's call it the Western world, I don't know how to put it, but or the most developed, the more developed countries, it might be, I don't know, 1 billion, so which is 15% of the population. What about the other 6 billion or 6.5 or 7? There is going to be a lot of concrete required, not only for buildings, but infrastructure and everything else. So if we want to be realistic and we really want to tackle, I think we need to find replacements for that, and a lot of research on all the way. So like, for example, at the moment, it's GGBS is being used a lot, and you can replace up to 50% cement content. Now, again, that was one of the silver bullets. I was so happy that we were using a lot of GGBS in all our projects, until a few weeks ago, I attended a webinar presentation, and someone said, yeah, that's right, there is less cement, but that GGBS that you're using now on your structures, it was being used before for something else. It's a byproduct. but it wasn't put in landfill. Now the construction industry is taking it, but then the other industry that was using it before, they have to use something else. So therefore, from a holistic
Oh,
point of view, is
oh
so,
yeah,
and that's again like
yeah.
again here we are. So no silver bullet. So but it just keeps again it's trying to do what is best, and I think you made the good point before is try to use as the minimal amount of materials. And I would say
Yes.
another keyword or concept is efficiency. So if we can build the walls or slabs, anything, with the less layers possible and as thin as possible, and they are lighter, therefore the structure can be lighter. And what we said earlier about the span and all those kind of things that are designed before we get into the materials, that's a huge step forward. Then of course we need to add the best materials. But I've been on the other side where you have a design and then someone says, now make it sustainable just by adding the right materials. So the magic material doesn't
Right. That
exist.
doesn't work.
So if you
No.
do a really good work, you can save 5-10% maximum, but that's it of carbon emissions.
So yeah, so one of the things that I like to say about, Cara Green's materials, we try to, curate this collection of products that have a good sustainability, not a perfect sustainability backstory. But, our product tend to be interior finishes. So when people use them, I like to represent the products as telling the story of the building. So much can be engineered into the building. And then if you choose these finishes that kind of let you tell that story in a tangible way, so you're touching and pointing at some of these materials that kind of let you convey the whole story of the building. That's more of, what our materials do or help do. But, there's downsides, to almost every building material that's out there that I know of right now.
But there are
Um,
ways to find that because with the EPDs, for example,
yep.
it's relatively easy, although reading an EPD is not the easiest thing you can do. So if you are, it's
Nor the most fun thing you
sorry,
can
second.
do. Nor is it the most
Oh no,
fun
no,
thing to do.
exactly. So, but there are some platforms and websites now that are helping to digest all that and make it easier. But when working at BDP, as I said earlier, on a few projects last year and the year before and this year, when we do look at finishes, for example, we have
Mhm.
2 or 3 products or facade as well, and we look at the EPDs, and then we can compare.
Mhm.
And if there are 2 products that are the performance is similar and the embodied
Yeah.
carbon is lower, we go for the one with the lower embodied carbon, and the cost doesn't
Yeah.
have to be higher. That's good because
Yeah.
then if we all do that, it's forcing somehow the industry to get better at it and cut the embodied carbon.
I agree. And I think that 2050 Materials is actually doing a very good job of
Indeed,
creating a platform where it's just in your face visible, which I think is
it is
fantastic.
indeed.
Um, so so just to kind of wrap up here, share your green design. It's kind of, you know, building out, understanding this ecosystem, and it sounds like you're kind of pulling the string on the sweater, and it unravels a little bit. You find something new, and but that's what needs to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
So thank you for doing that. And I think that kind of some key takeaways that I have here are, we have to engineer less material into our buildings and have them still be you know um, functional, stable buildings. But I think we can engineer. Engineering is really a key step in this. And then the other secret weapon here is common sense.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I just want to add to finish this. So what you said about shared green design that we keep doing and unraveling more things. So the last initiative or project we are working on is a documentary because again, we
Hmm.
were thinking, how can we tell? It's all about sending the message out and disseminating knowledge. And we thought, what would be the best way to also reach to the wider public? Because that's sorry, you were going to wrap up, and I'm adding one more. But it's one that
It's fine. It's fine.
there is one more thing that I think is important, and it's what is the wider public perception of sustainability or sustainable design or green design. And I think it's key because if we have an educated population, they will demand that sustainable design. And that's also what we are trying to achieve because what I found when we started with shared green design again, it's that we are mainly architects, engineers, but there are graphic designer and marketing people and solicitor. They have a different view. So when I was talking about the view and what we wanted to do, they said, Juan, that's boring. No one cares about that. I said, architects and engineers care. But they realized that other people don't really look at that. So we are trying to keep that level of detail that for professionals, but also try to bring other people into so they can get the message. And that's why we thought that documentary would be a good way, because we visually it's obviously you can understand it quicker. And the first building we chose for that is Canlis. It's a house in Mallorca by John Hudson, the architect of the Sydney Opera House, that after resigning from the Sydney Opera House, he moved to Mallorca and he built a house with local stone. And that he in the 70s, so he went to Mallorca, looked around, understood the climate, the weather, the local resources, and he saw that everybody was building with stone 80 by 40 by 40. So he built his house with those 80 by 40 by 40 blocks, and he made a fantastic masterpiece out of local stone. So our thing, the reason we chose it as well is, well, we are not, if John Hudson, who is a master, and he was able to do it in the 70s, why can't the rest of us do it? It's just, again, common sense and to be mindful of where we are, because not all the locations are the same. And so, yeah.
Well, will you let us know when the documentary is coming out?
There is a trailer already in our YouTube channel. So I'll send you the link after, but yeah, it's already there. It's looking good.
Okay. And your YouTube is Share Your Green Design?
Yeah, Share Your Green Design.
Yeah. Okay. And that's your website as well, shareyourgreendesign.com.
LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and we also have WeChat account in China, because there are all the others don't work in China. So.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Juan, for being on Build Green, Live Green.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you.
This is Jessica with Build Green, Live Green.